What's up, lore masters? Today we're going to be discussing an interesting ethical dilemma presented in the Star Trek Voyager episode, Nothing Human. Before we completely get started, I'll admit that this could get pretty contentious. So if you aren't into discussing ethics in Trek, click in the top right hand corner to see my Starship lore series, which I will be getting back to shortly. Hey, did I do it right? Did I do the trigger warning right? For those who haven't seen the Voyager episode, the synopsis is, put simply, a creature has attached itself to B'Elanna. It is sapping the life out of her. Literally. The Doctor has no idea how to save the chief engineer, so they do research into the leading exobiologist and create a holo simulation to have him help figure out how to save her. And this person happens to be a Cardassian who was at a public hospital during the Bajoran occupation. Before we really delve into it, what's interesting to me is the subtext of racism that permeates the crew, both Federation and Maquis. Admittedly, the amount of racism goes from a casual bigotry at anything Cardassian to outright hatred for someone of gray skin color. As an example, after Harry realizes that the simulation is going to be a person who was a Cardassian, he is surprised and even scoffs. He states that Cardassians aren't exactly the friendliest folks in the galaxy. Luckily, Harry isn't too much of a bigot that the logic of Krell saving B'Elanna does make sense to him, and his casual disdain for someone he doesn't like goes by the wayside. However, this will be an attitude we see pervade throughout the episode. Harry, Paris, and other Starfleet officers have a mild concern or disgust at Krell. Though, we don't see outright racism until the Maquis, B'Elanna and Tabor being the worst offenders. Both of them are instantly disgusted with the skin color that Krell has. Sorry, if I do this in a way that resonates with my audience, people are going to get mad. They don't like the way that it looks or the optics. Sorry, they don't like that he's a Cardassian. But yeah, it's the same thing. You don't like someone because of their skin color, you don't like someone because they're Cardassian, same thing. My first thoughts while researching this topic in Trek was to more discuss the ethical dilemma presented with Krell Moset's research. However, I find it virtually impossible to do so without first going over the bias and bigotry against Cardassians in this episode. Honestly, they are intricately intertwined. As discussed, Krell Moset is a hologram consultant that is assisting in saving B'Elanna. However, it is discovered that the real Krell Moset was, well, supposedly, some kind of monster that he experimented on Bajorans. I say supposedly because, well, let's get into it. My problem here is, firstly, everything we know about Krell is based on two pieces of information. The first is the memories of someone who was a very, very young child during the occupation. I know that seems to diminish his testimony, but let me ask you this, and I want you to be honest with yourself. Is it possible that a young child would misinterpret what they're seeing in a medical hospital? Would they interpret staff who are attempting to help people as harming them when they don't understand what's going on? Especially if they keep hearing adults saying that the head doctor is basically evil incarnate. The truth is, we are given nothing by Tabor that couldn't be explained as being benign and him misunderstanding what he was seeing. He states that he smelled dead flesh and chemicals. Well, yeah, it's a hospital. During an occupation. He states that the horrific experimentation was done, but he never states that he directly saw it. And additionally, he talks about how Krell would blind people to see how they interacted. Let me ask, is it possible that these people were blinded due to disease or other issues and Krell was attempting to assist them? That Tabor rewrote it in his mind? Again, I know I'm going to catch hell for this, but Tabor was a kid in a very bad situation, and the head doctor was a part of the species enslaving his people. Is it honestly outside of the realm of possibility he simply was going with what he was being told and grew up with this type of bias and rewrote everything in his mind? And then the secondary evidence. It's circumstantial at best. Okay, so Krell ordered the virus for the hospital. He didn't order enzymes that would normally create a vaccine, which I have no idea if that's real science or not, but whatever. And then there was an outbreak of the virus. Let me ask you this. If this happened on a Federation planet, what do you think people would have assumed? That it was an accidental outbreak or maybe just bad luck and it just happened to happen? And yet we're not giving the benefit of the doubt here. And all of this for a hologram. This isn't the real person. And yet, it's even stated, well, we can't do anything about the real Krell, so let's hurt him. This only proves that they're looking to go after this man. I mean, my God, have the writers of Voyager ever watched The Next Generation? If they haven't, they should watch the episode The Drumhead and see what it says about putting a man on trial for the sins of his ancestry. I mean, it's quite enlightening. Look, I'm no Cardassian apologist. I'm also not stupid. Is it more likely that Krell, a doctor during the occupation, was committing experimentation on Bajorans? Yeah, it's more likely than not. But all of this is very, very circumstantial. And for the rest of the episode, they just assume it's gospel, when it's just not. I'm not discounting Tabor nor his fillings, but there's nothing definitive here. And no, Chakotay mentioning that there were several Maquis that talked about an evil doctor, it doesn't mean anything. In fact, I would say that only helps the case that perhaps Tabor, as a young child, was manipulated by adults who hated Cardassians. Just while we're here, there is one piece of dialogue by 7 of 9 that really irks me. She specifically states,
"It is interesting. The Borg were accused of assimilating information with no regard for life. This Cardassian did the same, yet his behavior is tolerated."
Again, he's not a Cardassian. He's a fracking simulation. But beyond that, not only is his behavior not tolerated, he would be prosecuted by most civilizations, including, but not limited to, Bajoran and Federation court systems. You sanctimonious piece of shit. Okay. Her logic is stupidly flawed. First, Krell is a hologram, and the option is going to be to delete him. And while I don't think the Krell hologram is actually sentient at this point, you are as guilty as he is. The hologram Krell could not impact the actions of the real Krell. He had no ability to stop or aid him. Just like you couldn't help your actions with the Borg. But if we assume that the hologram Krell is the bad guy and must be punished, man, I hope you enjoy floating out airlocks, because the punishment for this is apparently death, Cupcake. And there is more evidence that you are guilty, 7, than him. I know, guys, I've really focused on this form of bigotry a lot when the video originally was going to talk about ethics and medicine as defined by Trek. But I sincerely feel that it completely paints the entire scenario. Looking at the ultimate question that is presented, should we utilize medicine techniques gathered by illegal experimentation on higher sentience if it will help others? This entire episode is addressed in a meeting between the Doctor, Paris, Tuvok, Chakotay, and Janeway. I'm going to give their positions and then address the issue specifically. Chakotay's argument, initially at least, is that B'Elanna would not want someone like Krell to operate on her to save her life, that she personally would not want his research saving her. And really that's what we're talking about, it's the research saving her, not Krell himself, he's a hologram. This is the only legitimate argument that I can see against allowing him to help her. B'Elanna does have a right to self-autonomy and the right to refuse something done to her that she doesn't want done. That said, she is the chief engineer and her crew needs her. So should Janeway have forced it on her? That's a conversation for another video. But for simplicity, what I'm saying is that in normal circumstances, this is a valid reason to not allow him to operate on her. Tuvok, quite honestly, makes the dumbest argument. Second most stupid statement in the episode if you ask me. His theory is that to use the medicine legitimizes the work. And Chakotay actually agrees with this, saying that it sets a precedent. This is monumentally stupid. You can utilize the work that is there and not legitimize illegal experimentation. If there is something to be gleaned, then throwing it away only further makes what happened to the victims a waste. Make the punishment for torture and experimentation so unpalatable that no one would want to do it, but yes, utilize the information. That's like saying because I learned to drive, I legitimize accidents that happen. It is stupid. Thank God that Tuvok is in no way a hypocrite. Oh, before I forget, hey guys, completely unrelated. Next week will be the All Vidian week. The first review will be on the episode Resolutions. Oh, you remember that episode. It features the Vidians, a species that goes around attacking other species, ripping their organs out of every man, woman, and child, whether they are awake or not, for their own medical needs. They do a ton of medical research at the expense of every other culture they meet. Well, anyway, in that episode, Tuvok reaches out and uses their research to save Janeway and Chakotay, effectively using decades of the raping and pillaging of other sentients to save 2 people. Oh no. Oh no! Anyway, back to the meeting. We have Paris, who thinks the research should be used, but ironically, I disagree with his methodology here. Paris is quite clearly compromised and wants to save her no matter what. I disagree with him because I don't think that's an appropriate stance. It's not wrong to consider the use of medicine or anything else, especially if it comes at the expense of other people. Being emotional and thinking that the ends justify the means doesn't do anyone any good. Ironically, I think it's Janeway who gives the best argument. She states that B'Elanna's health matters most of all, and that pragmatically we should use the research as it's not furthering harm, it's using something that happened to help someone who had nothing to do with it. She also accepts responsibility for this. I mean, again, she's pragmatic and it makes sense. It's very well done. I wish they had written her more like this. Ultimately, they will utilize the research and then delete the program. Interestingly, the ethics of the Doctor only come into play after he saves someone's life, so take that as you will. But here's the most interesting piece to all of this. In my opinion, the episode looked at the wrong message. After doing a live stream and looking into this entire ordeal, I discovered one interesting thing. Unlike what most people think, myself included, the Nazi human experimentation, of which this episode is supposed to take a look at, yielded very little in the way of results medically. The only real advancements we saw was in trauma and psychological impacts. Really, what they should have explored is how little of a positive impact this type of experimentation has. Instead of so much discussion on how this is right or wrong, perhaps a focus on how it wasn't worth it. Change the dynamics a bit. Make it so that it is beyond a reasonable doubt that Krell did this experimentation. And then have the result be a significant step in researching the vaccine, but not completing the vaccine itself. And make it so that they could have attained that research in other ways. And also have most of the experimentation have nothing to do with the disease. This is not only a more interesting conversation, but more true to life. I don't know though. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? What do you guys think? How did Trek handle this? Do you agree with the Doctor or Krell? Let me know in the comments below. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.